Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast. Today, I am super excited because we are going to talk to Joachim and Mike from Acrobator, or should I say 432 Legacy, or 432 Legacy. They are great fans. We do so much with them around deep work and how should I call this, the true introspection, the stuff that really hurts. And they are doing a lot in the European venture ecosystem. So I'm super excited to dive deep with them on that, as well as how they're using AI to really do something truly unique that I don't think there's that many in Europe, nor even globally, that can do. I really hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
All right, gentlemen, Mike and Joachim, welcome to the European VC podcast. For the not the first time, not the second time either, but probably the third time.
That's right.
Right about, something like this. Yeah.
Something like that. All right, we're doing a ton together, but first I just want to state the facts or the core stats on you and your firm, just so that we have everyone up to speed and you add a bit of context to that. Is that okay, guys?
Sounds good.
So you're both general partners of 432 Legacy or 432 Legacy, and the predecessor fund was Acrobator. And everyone, I hope, will know that we've invested in Acrobator and been warm and hearty supporters of you guys. Your fund size is around 50 million. You have 28 million in AUM currently, and you're headquartered in the Netherlands. The focus is seed, but you invest up to Series A. You're globally oriented with a focus on Europe and the US. You're focusing on B2B software and software-enabled hardware. And you've made some notable investments that include Lemonaid Health, Vital Fields, Stepshot, Archimoto, Ready Player Me, Tango, Collar, Promo Republic, EasyDmark, My Laboratories, Binary, and Stepshot. Did I get that somewhat correct, guys?
Somewhat.
What did I not get correct? Tell me.
No, we could go.
What should we have said more?
No, it's all good. I think we can go a bit deeper into later as well, the transition kind of, and why the new name. But we'll get there.
Let's get that out of the way. For 432 or 432, what do you prefer?
432.
432.
We're not counting down.
Yes, I know. Well, when you first started playing around with the name, I've had good fun saying 1, 2, 3, what?
Exactly.
So that's the nice, courteous LP that will make fun of your name. You gotta love those guys.
I think that's always great. I think if people make a little bit of fun of your name, it means they'll remember something. It's like nicknames that people give you that have nothing to do with your name. It's fantastic.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Okay, so just to add a bit of context, we invested in you guys back in 2022, and we invested because we really liked the team that you had put together, and of course the combination of data and arbitrage focus on diaspora founders. Diaspora founders, of course, from the former Soviet republics / Eastern Europe / post-Russia, or pre-Russia is maybe the right way to say it. And we've come to know you guys outside of the regular LPGP scope. And we're, of course, incredibly enthusiastic about the personal development journey we're embarking on together, but as well also the work that you're doing with the fund, because I absolutely think that what you're doing with the fund now is going to resonate incredibly well, and also why we're leaning into this. And of course, anyone might remember that we did an Austria retreat together. We organized that together with Fred Destin, and we're going to do much more in that space. We're going to talk a bit about that here as well. But it's clear that this is also part of the fund thesis, the firm thesis, and that's what we're going to talk a ton about. But let's jump into this personal development space and just talk a bit about what got you here and why you think it's so important.
Look, I mean, personal development, it starts with the personal journey. I feel to go a little bit deeper into it because that gets to the point why we're doing this. For me personally, it was several milestones in my life. I feel the seeds were planted back at university when my roommate happened to have like a Tibetan Buddhist teacher. His name was Rinpoche. So I learned meditation from him and really got more into mindfulness, which has been an amazing tool for me. But I think the biggest teacher at the end are really difficult life events. So for me, that was the death of my mother, which happened soon after I broke up the 7-year relationship. So essentially, within a very short amount of time, I lost 2 of the most important women in my life, and that period was tough. I back then I didn't really want to face it, so I didn't really want to work with grief. I instead just focused on work, and I think I pushed myself to the point where I several times was very close to burnout. And in that time, also the way of working, I had this period where I was quite anxious. I remember still where I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would say is fuck, because I remember something I have to do, So that already tells you something about the state of mind if that's how you wake up in the morning. I was doing a lot of multitasking, so I was very much focused on quantity, doing more instead of focusing on quality, on like really doing the things that are important and really move the needle. And there was a lot of numbness too, because I pushed emotions away and was kind of focused on distraction in a way, right? Work is a distraction in that context as well. I didn't really go into the emotions I should have gone. So that really caught up with me later. And there I got deeply into coaching. I worked with several coaches. I went to a lot of retreats and really worked like with holistic coaches and like mindfulness and several techniques that really got me deeper into the body and also the heart. And that's been incredibly.
In the company, we did it. We participated together to also be able to call out things on each other.
100%.
Yeah,
exactly.
With the patterns we had.
Yeah, work with a coach in the partnership, which has been really, really beneficial. And so it's always amazing to have that mirror, and next to the things that you're currently doing, for me was also a mirror in my past, going a bit deeper into kind of like things like childhood, like when my parents got divorced, where you just realize certain coping mechanisms and patterns. So for me, this was really a journey going, I would say, deeper into connection with myself and others. So it's the best thing I think I've ever done in my life to work with these coaches and do all the work. And looking back at it now, it's just something that we want to bring more to founders and do selected coaches and the things that work best to give this also to founders. So that's maybe a bit short intro from me and where I was coming from.
Joachim, could you add in?
Yeah, sure. So the funny thing is that I'll tell you how I got to that point, but the coach that you guys did the retreat with is actually the coach I used. And then, Mike inspired me at one point to when he went really into, wanting to bring in more this development side of personal of founders, but also ourselves into the business. So I thought, okay, maybe you should, introduce him to group that. And then, that sort of ball started rolling, which is great to see. But to me, the experience I had with her was very powerful because before that, I was in this vicious circle of self-doubt, lack of self-love. I couldn't accept any compliments. And basically, I was completely incapable and unaware of, the patterns that shape me. And to me, sort of adding this personal development into everything we do in the fund is very much about that continuous learning about who you are. So for me, going into this 4-day retreat, dealing with things from my past, whether it was, arduous founder journey with company that we founded way too young. I mean, talk about fake it till you make it. I mean, that was definitely sort of an everyday thing. And then, going into a next adventure, but being screwed over by my business partners, yet fully laying the blame continuously on myself, what I should have done, what I, and not being able to acknowledge anger or deceit. And basically that pattern that would lasted for, I think, 7-8 years was broken within a 4-day retreat. And that's amazing. So even though, I did go through a divorce, like that helped me as well. So rekindle that bond with my ex in a way that right now We still go on holidays together with the kids. Mike knows her. We've used her as well to, use her experience on the HR side. And yeah, so for me, this is such a fundamental thing that I think needs to be included in everything we do. Hence the focus on it.
And also what you said, Joachim, divorce and the personal stuff. I feel, in business, especially if you have more of a transactional relationship as an investor or the founder, like all the personal stuff, like often just kind of like is on the side, and I feel when you also just purely look at like business results, if something fundamental is happening in your life, like a divorce, just saying has a massive impact, so not knowing about it to begin with, let alone being able to talk about it, is already like creating problems, and I feel like that's why the holistic approach of understanding what's happening in the life of a person, in this case of a founder, is massively important. It's really, really needed. So it's also what we did in this fund then with coaching as well. We tried a lot of different formats, so we involved coaches in the pre-deal phase where they were part of interviews and also kind of designed a bit of like an overview of like how to look at founders, which is helpful, for both positive and negative character traits, to look for some red flags or to like really powerful characteristics, one-on-one coaching and the founder team coaching. So to just focus on better communication and help the founders, but also often especially if there's like, problems between the founders, to have a mediator, have a coach involved is massively powerful. So that's also some, the stats show the biggest failure of startups at the end of the day is often founder breakups, right? When it just doesn't work out. So doing a lot of the founder coaching and also like playing around with like group coaching and going into retreats. I mean, Andreas, as you mentioned, doing the Austria retreat at the end of the day is just another format now to bring the work to the wider ecosystem, which is amazing to have them experience the power of it.
Could you share a bit more? I think it's going to be interesting for people to hear. So when we started doing this and I started talking to more and more about it, there were two things that I found that surprised me a bit. First thing was people that I did not expect to care at all cared a lot and were very interested. And the other part was people that I had no idea were deep into coaching work and almost spiritual practices turned out to actually be deep into that. So I'd maybe love for you to talk a bit about like, how do you incorporate it into the firm? How do you work with founders? As you shared, I think it was an interesting finding that you said, well, you would try to actually have coaches involved already in the deal screening phase. Kind of where have you found that this makes sense to implement, and where are you kind of leaning in and where are you saying, nah, it's not this step?
So maybe like first to react to what you said in your experience in the retreat. So, I mean, there's different formats, right? So first I would say you have like one-on-one coaching, group coaching. Then you have like a retreat setting, which we did, Andreas, which is multiple days. And if we just go into a setting like this, one multi-day format, I think people who haven't experienced this don't understand what a container like this does. And also what you said afterwards, and to your point of how much love you feel for everybody there, because, and this is about vulnerability. You feel the love because everybody's so real. There's no bullshit, it's really like just, this is what it is with all the shit that's included. And that's just an incredibly like, heart opening space. And then the other thing that it really takes, I feel, is like an amazing coach, because there's so much like mediocre stuff out there. There's so many like early stage coaches there that are frankly not that good. So to really have like a world-class, like amazing coach and experiencing this firsthand is something different entirely. And with Rupta, also how you experience it, she just in this specific format, what she does, she's done this for more than 30 years. It's a really unique blend of work she's doing there, and I think that experience is also truly special. And to answer your question on how we bring it is really the combination of first, and especially in the pre-deal phase, not only do you want to look into who the founders are, but you also already want to understand what type of coach would be the right fit for a founder, because every person is different. You will have people that are highly resistant to coaching, maybe don't see the benefit of it. And then you can just do a very light touch, and someone who is great at this, just working with a founder on the business level to show the value as an entry point. And then you have other founders like, who are already way, way more open to it, and that need a way more holistic approach. So it's really about the matchmaking and matching the right person to the founder. That's absolutely critical. It's also then about like getting the portfolio companies and founders together, like doing this in a format where they can share with each other in a very vulnerable way. Because then there's one thing that they can just share, which is massively powerful, but also, of course, asking each other advice, feedback, all of this stuff, which is massively powerful. And then going to retreats as well, which you then do, like, let's say once a year, where you go all together offsite, you go on a retreat together, and there the bonding experience is completely on another level, right? You're in nature, you're out of your work zone, you're in a different setting, in a format that really encourages like the highly personal sharing and everything. And so it's a blend of these things that we approach.
One question I got from a lot of people was, did you do this with other people from tech? I don't think I'd want to do that with other VCs or other founders that are in the same ecosystem as me. Am I going to talk about my troubled childhood or my troubles, in my private life with that group? No, fuck no. Well, I can definitely, chime in with my perspective on this and my experience, but I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
Oh, isn't it all about sort of maybe removing a bit of your ego in the equation? And in that process, then understanding like we're all dealing with the same little cliches that hold us back. And when that's out of the way, it's like, oh, I can actually talk about this. Like the time it takes to get to a point where you're truly communicating without the ego and just with compassion, but also pure interest and inspiration. Like that is the objective we're trying to achieve here as well, right? So, because as investors, we're investing in companies that are under a high pressure environments, and to get to a point where you have a relationship where, you've peeled all the layers away so you can actually communicate on what matters and what worries you up. And they can be personal, they can be business, and it can be a mix of both. That's the state we want to get to.
Yeah, and Andreas, I think what I would say to the people highly skeptical, is imagine all the different layers and how you can meet people. You can go to a conference where you very shortly have a transactional conversation. Hey, what do you do? What do I do? And that's it. Then after conference, there may be dinner where you can go a little bit deeper and you actually hear something personal of the person. Some people do this more of a trip, where they take investors and founders and they go 2 days somewhere to Italy and they do some hikes or whatever, right? And there you already go way deeper into personal conversations because you're out of a context. I think what this is taking this like so much further. So I think the choice really for people in general is, do you want to go deeper within yourself and discover things that like you may have never discovered before, which takes courage. It really takes courage. And the other element is the connection that you will feel to others is really next level. And there the question is, do you want to get to know the people like this, right? Because this is it's a beautiful opportunity to really get to know the person. And there's no way that within 4 days in this example, you build up such a deep connection with someone, right? And I think that is beautiful and that's unique.
What I've thought since was that there were two things that were absolutely, both important in terms of the value that you take away from it, but also that enables it or allows this to be a magical place. I think one is that you have people that you actually look up to or that you think are incredible. I think at a retreat, at our retreat specifically, we had Fred Destin there, and he was one of our co-organizers. And I don't think there's anyone in the ecosystem almost that do not look up to Fred in some way, because we all, whether you like him or not, or you think that he says is what is right or not, you recognize that this is really a man that knows his shit. And being in a place with other people that you feel like that about, and they then open up and they are honest, can mean the world to you, because you can see, well, if he can, then I, or if he deals with that shit, it's okay that I deal with that shit. So I think that one thing is super important, that you see other people that you actually look up to open up. And I think that given we're all in tech, we have many of the same idols, right? And if you do a retreat like this, you're automatically going to have your investors there or founders, exited founders from your own ecosystem there. So for that reason, that dynamic is going to be there when we do our retreats. And then the second thing is also there's something truly magical about the long-term bond that you build with this group. And I think it's for that reason you might think it's actually the same reason that you'd think I don't want to do this. Well, the fact of the matter is that when you do it, you realize it's all the more powerful and the effect of it is all the more long lasting because you did it in this group.
I think, Andreas, you're very right. Because I did this, in a setting, how long ago now? 6 years almost, where the setting was, people from all over the place, right? And different walks of life and different industries and everything. And the experience is what it is. It's truly life-changing for some. But to have this other layer of connection, because you're all somewhat connected to this same ecosystem, is a lot more powerful to give you also the incentive in a way to continue those relationships. Because what I experienced in that initial sort of deep dive I did is that most of the people I lose touch with because they're nowhere, connected to me on other levels. So I think, the way we're approaching it this way is can really create much more long-term bonds.
And an absolutely core learning from something like this is we're all just people and we are all miserable and we're all struggling. And that learning is all the more powerful because it's people from your own industry. Because the next time you're at a tech conference and feel like you can't talk to someone because you're not a cool founder yet, you're just doing this small thing. Well, actually you can, right? You remember, wait a second. All of these people could have been at the retreat and they would have shared the same shit as all the rest of us. And then all of a sudden you can deal with life much better, I think.
And the crazy thing is, like Joachim mentioned already, we all deal with the same shit, just different chapters. But the core principles are all the same. Then we have different stories, and it's crazy even how similar those stories are. And you find yourself in a group, and you're like, holy fucking shit, right? Which is also completely kind of like the problem you thought you have also is like evaporates in that group because you realize, wow, you listen to some of the other problems and you're thinking, holy shit, how does that person cope? It's such a beautiful experience for you also to just detach a bit from your own problems and to feel you're all in it together. And it seems so obvious, but when you're in it, it's truly every single time. Again, it's an incredible experience.
Mike, what you said about sort of hearing other people with their sort of the patterns they have, my initial reaction would have been like, oh, what they're sharing is so much more intense than what I'm experiencing. So the tendency was first like, I shouldn't complain. But then you learn that it doesn't really matter, right? It's what you have. It's your pattern. It's your thing, whether that's because you got one cookie instead of 2 cookies from your mother when you were growing up, or because you have some really painful experiences. Doesn't matter. It's your pattern.
But also to add one thing, which is, there's a saying, some people die when they're 25 and don't get buried until they're 75. Yeah. And it's incredible how many of us, me included, walked around like for some time numb. It doesn't matter what caused the numbness and why we're doing it, but just this feeling of like, that you're pushing some emotions away, that like everything seems okay, seems good, but not extremely vivid, and then having the experience, and it could be, there's many, many different ways in, but having these experiences where you get really in touch with that aliveness again, which can be also by practicing anger, going into grief, whatever it is. There's so many different ways in, and you feel this fucking aliveness inside, like, holy fucking shit, where has this been? And share this then with your partner, share this then with your friends and family, then the realness that comes with that connection, because people finally see you, there you are, and it changes everything. It changes every single relationship. And this is an experience I truly wish for everyone. And this is also the reason we're doing this. And it's so hard to put in words because you really have to experience it. And of course, I understand you're really skeptical listening to it, But then I would that really encourage you to just try it out. And what we're going to do now also with Rupta next weekend, I'm going to do this entry format with her, trying to do 1.5 hour session. So I want to do shorter sessions to just get people in, just for them to have a taster and an experience for what it is.
You dipped your toe.
Let's do a commercial break. We as we've said along the way, we've said that we are doing these trips, and we do have the next one already planned. By the time this episode goes out, it'll be out and live. You can go on EUVC.events, and then you'll be able to find it there. In April, we're going to be doing another retreat similar to the one we did last time with Rupta. So everything we're talking about here applies to that trip. And if anyone is excited from hearing about this, they can definitely go there and then reach out and say they're interested. It is an incredible experience. And Mike came over almost when I was standing there crying almost. And then he said, "Now, Andreas, do you understand why I think this work is important and I want to spread it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I get that." So yeah, absolutely important work. And I can only wholeheartedly recommend to anyone that they embark on this journey somehow. Now let's shift gears, because while self-work is important to you at 432 Legacy, it's not the only thing. Data and AI is very central to you, and it's something that has both been important to your whole investor journey so far, but then in terms of where you invest and what you focus on. But then these last years in venture, ChatGPT and all the enormous strides we've made in terms of data processing and sourcing tools that can be developed with the help of LLMs and other AI tools, there's suddenly come a plethora of new things we can do. I'd love to ask you, maybe give us first an overview of how data and AI works into the new fund or in the new iteration of your thesis and work.
Pretty much in short, so the question why integrate data into basically investing is we want to remove bias as much as possible, and at the same time identify startups with hockey stick growth, and it's while avoiding the hype valuations. Those are the things we're trying to combine. To get there, it starts with very data-driven sourcing, ranking, shortlisting, but also after investment, helping data support, whether we should follow, stay, look for an exit. Yeah, but all in all, we try to stay away from meaningless sort of buzzwords on, hey, we use AI. But yeah, that's the short answer of it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Andreas, to go a bit into it, because I think the whole hype part is a bit of a problem. And let me also go maybe into how we actually got to the system, which gives a bit of context. So first, on the AI hype part, there've been a bunch of hype cycles, right? This goes decades back. I still remember 2014 when I was investing pre-seed, where suddenly all the decks had AI on them, right? So I mean, a bit similar to what happened after ChatGPT back in the days. Also, there was a lot of companies that suddenly talked about AI and said they did something with machine learning, and many of them didn't, or it was very superficial. But back in the days, I also co-founded an AI community called City AI, where we're in 80 cities, and also a conference called World Summit AI. For me, I did it together with Christoph, our Welsbach, and we just wanted better access to deal flow and talent, back in the days. And we also had already then discussion, like, how long is it going to take for AI to actually be better at finding deals than humans, And to me, it's crazy that we're still having this discussion right now, So I feel it's not a question if, it's only a question when, and the when indeed is uncertain. We don't know, but it's definitely going to happen. The problem is that it's extremely tough to build it.
Just to clarify, both sourcing and picking.
Yeah, 100%. Right? I think that the problem is that it's just extremely tough to build a comprehensive system and extremely expensive. So the tough part is that for early stage funds, seeds funds, this is nearly impossible, right? And then in the future, you're likely going to see that it's more going to be service providers like, SaaS platforms are going to offer this functionality to early stage funds because they don't have the resources to do it themselves. And then the later stage funds, some of them are going to have really good proprietary systems because they have data science teams, 10, 20 people, and all the money to spend on data and compute to actually build this. Right? So that's a crucial one. And in our case, I think the story involves quite a bit of serendipity as well. How we found Quantics, because it was 2008.
Serendipity was the definition of VC pre AI sourcing.
That's you. And also, but also often in general, how things go in life, which I find beautiful. If you look and connect the dots backwards. And in our case, I mean, this was in 2019. I worked for OpenOcean, early Series A fund, and I was also doing this experiment then. I basically, with a data scientist, try to basically rank deals based on signals of LinkedIn, where we basically made all kinds of formulas to figure out seniority of a team and a person. We looked into data signals from like Crunchbase, like GitHub stars, a whole bunch of things, try to combine them with formulas to give like an indication of a score for a startup that you could apply in any list. So it was very basic, no AI to it, but just experimenting to understand this better. And back in the days, we also did research on what are the best AI systems out there. So I would talk to the CTO of like Signalfire or the EQT guys, Motherbrain. And obviously, you only see kind of the tip of the iceberg, whatever they're willing to share. But you get a better and better idea of roughly what's out there. And back in the days, the best system we could find was a system from a billionaire fund in the US, the WR Hambrecht, that seemed to be the only fund that had like a comprehensive AI system to really give a macro view of the markets, right? To essentially give an overview of all the private companies in the world that are benchmarked to public companies. And back in the days, we looked at it and were impressed, but we didn't know who built the system, and we didn't talk to the WR Hambrecht guys. But Joachim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think for many, maybe WR Hambrecht is not a really recognizable name, but to think about that they did seed in most of the FANG companies, listed Google. These guys have been around for 50 years. They've done over 600 investments in that period of time, but also being sort of a boutique investment bank as well as a fund at the same time. They're one of the old school VCs that developed Silicon Valley.
And just to go back to the serendipity factor, so to keep it very short, then just many years later, I sat down together with Sarah Fisher, executive Johnson & Johnson, who I've known also since 2018, and Joachim, and we talk about this very topic. And she looks at us and says, you need to talk to Thomas. Makes introduction. We jump on a call with Thomas. And then midway somewhere in the call, I'm like, wait, this is the guy that built the system for WR Hambrecht. That's the guy. He owns all the IP. He has this like data science team of 10 data scientists. He has been doing this for close to 20 years, just iterating and developing the system. So we're like, what are the odds, So, and then over the years, we just developed a relationship together, talked like more and more also around values. We looked at deals together, applied also like checked with the system some of the deals we did in Acrobator. And it was really gradually like developing that relationship. And then eventually he became independent. And we just asked him the question, hey, should we do the next fund together? And he works together with corporates, but for the rest, for early stage, decided to do it together with us, also together with Sarah. So yeah, it's really, really crazy how these things come together, but that's how we got to the system. I mean, maybe you often want to talk a bit more.
Yeah. And also like what's important in the long run, right? In the end, you want to have something which is different from what people can actually otherwise buy in the market, whether it's cheap or expensive, because that's going to give you your edge. Because in the end, we're in a competitive business. And I think the best way to compare, what is Quantics, it's sort of what the leading quant hedge funds use for public markets, but then for the opaque private markets. And that's what makes it very special in a sense. But it's also important to note that this is not a, computer says yes, computer says no system. This is very much a hybrid approach between human insight and a massive amount of compute and data and proprietary data. So, because in the end, generating lists of companies isn't very difficult. there's fairly cheap services out there. You can get that, but then what? Then what do you do? Right? And then the usual sort of signals people go for and try to make an algorithm out of that are LinkedIn Dynamics, GitHub, mention socials. But in the end, there's very little actual intelligence, or even, let's talk about even less so correlation. So what we are able to do with Quantics is basically see, but also value every private company in the world in real time.
Seed stage onwards.
And that's insane. What it allows you to do is to really think about, spend a lot of time on where do I want to invest and why. Have that conversation as well with your LPs to align those interests. And then scope your market, list it, rank it, so that you have a pretty good idea that you're talking to the most promising companies within your investment thesis. Because in the end, otherwise, when we invested in Binary, for instance, firmware, cybersecurity company, very impressed by the team, very impressed by what they were doing and whatever signals we could find on them. But in the end, the reality is it's like picking a marble out of a very small bag of marbles and going like, oh, this is the shiniest one. Where the reality is that there's like 100 times as many marbles. We're just not able to understand them and value them. So what we're dealing with here is a system that the signals we generate have about an 80 to 85% correlation. They're processed through about 1,000 models. We're continuously trained on the data of 30,000 listed companies, and then supplemented by data we receive from the Fortune 500 clients that Thomas has. So that combination creates a very unique data set and very expansive, not tied to, a certain segment of the world, but truly cross markets.
And it's also, I think, important to say, Andreas, that this is really around the unknown unknowns, because the problem, what Joachim said earlier, is the vast amount of VCs that say they do something with machine learning when it comes to deal flow, whatever, sourcing, picking, whatever it is that the starting point is what they think that works, whatever that may be. Yeah. So they look at like LinkedIn signals, or they look at website traffic signals, or GitHub, or whatever. Right. And then from there, try to like build intelligence to draw conclusions from. What Thomas did is very different. He essentially said, look, I don't know what works. Let machine learning figure this out. And to Joachim's point is, he benchmarked all the private companies to more than 30,000 public companies, and continuously with pattern matching the iterations to get like higher and higher accuracy to identify the valuation of a company and basically the quarter-on-quarter growth indicated in valuation. That's it. So it's really around huge amounts of data where a human couldn't see any correlation that machine learning does, and around the sheer amount of time that he spent, which is close to 20 years, to improve this, iterated, and obviously also the money spent on it.
When you say 80 to 85% correlation, what does that mean exactly?
Yep. So it's a soup of data that we're looking at. And we're not talking, LinkedIn. We're talking just the breadcrumbs of the internet. First of all, you need to identify signals within that data soup. Then you are going to try and understand whether those signals, combination of those signals, running them through the models, can say anything about a valuation of a company. Now, you can't benchmark that with private companies, so you have to do it with public companies. So that's where the public company data set comes in. So you take 30,000, which is more than half of listed companies in the world, and you start matching the signals you get from your data sets and a valuation that comes out of it to the actual valuation of the public company. And in that spectrum, we have an 80 to 85 correlation. Now, once you have that, then you can say, because then you're basically looking at companies across many market segments. And then if you're then able to identify private companies and use the breadcrumbs that they leave behind and the signals you get out of those running through the models, then with a fairly high degree of certainty, you can say, well, this company should be worth this much. And it was worth this much a quarter ago and a quarter ago, the quarter before, giving you some kind of indication of how the company is developing. Now, when you go into the market and you start talking to those companies, or you start doing research and you see that, the last round was, at a 300 million valuation where your model says it's probably closer to 50. At least you have an indication like maybe there's a bubble. And, I think you'll be fooled to deny that this happens more often than not in venture.
But you talk about valuation here. Valuation is kind of almost, it's more a matter of what money do you need to build what you need to build ahead of your Series A, unless you're maybe doing the very most, high sexy deals. Then you're talking about, okay, what's the hype valuation, so to say, on this, or the competitive dynamic that sets the valuation. It's not really what's in the company. Why, or how does a valuation tool, because that's what you've described so far, how does the tool help you spot the company that's not valued anything in particular? They don't have much history. What you really want to do is you just, you're bagging a company that you know nothing about, so to say, at the seed stage.
I think the point, Andreas, so that's why I said pre-seed, that doesn't work because there's nothing on the company, right? But from seed stage onwards, it already works, and that's the crazy part about it.
Does it help you, Mike, define just the valuation, or does it help you?
The point is that you get an indication of growth. It doesn't matter, just take the valuation part. It doesn't matter what that indication is. You get an indication of how well a company is doing and how it's growing quarter on quarter, right? And thereby, we can focus on the companies that seem to be growing the fastest first. Meaning, we can now look into, Joachim earlier gave the example of Binary in the firmware cybersecurity segment. So we can now look into firmware, look at all companies globally in firmware cybersecurity who seem to grow the fastest, and only focus on the top 10 or 20, reach out to them. And the conversations, we still do the same work in terms of due diligence and the conversations we have with the teams. But the starting point is already that we're likely talking to the best companies out there. And on top of it, the valuation is also giving a very interesting signal whether certain companies or markets are overhyped, right? So that's the other element here that is very beneficial also from investment perspective.
So the relevance of talking about valuation here is really because it's a concrete data point to show the correctness or the conciseness or precision of the tool. Because you don't use that. It comes out with evaluation for anything, so to say. What really matters is that it comes out and says, these are the top 10 companies that you should be thinking about.
Exactly.
And then you go into the typical VC process of figuring out which one are we going to back.
Exactly.
The only thing under is, and that is to note, so it's not quite, nothing's black and white. So Mike described is it helps us understand okay, these, if we want to be in this space, these are the top companies we probably should be talking to. That's, the marbles in the bag. But given the fact that this system has been operating actively and invested with and has a pretty excellent track record for close to 20 years, we also have data that shows when the system said hey, the delta between what data shows us the company should be worth and what's being asked for is becoming too large, over time, it seems to be more correct than a human being. It is something that we do weigh, into, this equation. That is, how we can still look at it as an element in our decision making.
Yeah. And it only gets more valuable, so to say, the tool when it comes to that valuation point, when you're looking at follow-on investments and so on. I get that 100%. Guys, tell me about the future of 432 Legacy / Acrobator, as you were formerly known. Tell us about the future of the firm. Where are you headed?
Yeah, so look, I mean, and bring this together, I think how we started earlier, in a future where if you say AI is going to be better at picking deals than any human can, then the personal relationship is more important than ever, right? So if we go, it doesn't matter how far in the future, this is going to be commonplace. Personal relationships matter the most, and which is also why we focus on two things. 432 Legacy, it's the focus on two things, which is personal development, which is really helping us to build those personal relationships with the founders, really helping us to basically guide them on their journey in a holistic way, which is like increasingly in need for founders and people. And the other side is the data-driven investing, right, that we already described. So I think that is core. I already mentioned how we do the coaching, and this is really at the core of what we do with 432 Legacy.
It's basically bringing like two very opposites, right? The objective and the subjective, where you could say that we deal on the one side with the world of truth, like the data, the AI, the objective analysis, and the other side, the world of human potential, right? Which is very different beast. It's guided by introspection, connections, transformation. And by, marrying the two, I think what we're trying to do is overcome two of the worst enemies of sustainable value creation, right? That on the one hand, it's like, if you have a total lack of self-knowledge, connection, or empathy, those are the seeds for toxic cultures, short-sighted pursuits of wealth, for, the foregoing of, your responsibility of, what it is you're building and why. And on the other hand, it's bias, right? Bias in principle, a very severely limited view of what the market actually is and how it's dealing. So there may be like one thing to add also on how we can use Quantics is when we're looking at a market, like, how index, you say, McKinsey reports this and this market by 2030 growing at a CAGR of this and that. We don't actually do that. We look at the market as a bottom up. So we look at every company within a market, use our AI to establish valuations of those companies, but also going, 2-3 years back to understand how do we see this market is growing? What do we think this market is worth? And I tell you, that's probably a lot better than having some, I don't know how much research actually goes into those McKinsey reports, but it's amazing how they're always very, very positive.
Yeah, well, I always have and this is terrible, and many will hate me for it, I think, or think I'm just stupid, but I always have a huge skepticism to the value of data. And that's because the majority of the data I see on anything either just confirms a belief that, to anyone who is knee deep in any space would say, I know this. So yes, thank you for the report. I'll put it in my slide deck, but it doesn't really change my perception of anything. And then as always, if you're in the frontier space of anything, it is always delayed so massively that you can't use it. It's only for the broad market. It's not for anyone that knows anything in the majority of cases.
And that's what we have here, right? Everything we do is real time, which is insane. And I think that's also what connects sort of Mike, Sarah, Thomas, and myself is really this desire to bring these two together to employ basically tried and tested ingredients, both in personal development and data guided early stage investment, but in creating that connection also between the LP and the founder, because now we're doing something where the interests are completely aligned.
Maybe before we close, we have to touch on why a new name. Why not just Acrobator Fund 2? Why do we need 432 Legacy?
Yeah, so it goes a little bit, names are always a tricky thing, first of all, right? But it goes a little bit into the history of, why is Acrobator called Acrobator? So initially I started Acrobator with Bas, but Bas was already, pretty known angel investor in that part of the world that we're focusing on. He had a digital marketing boutique called Acrobator. So the concept of the fund was, hey, let's, invest in those group of founders that she has a good connection with and support them with growth hacking. So it was kind of logical to use the Acrobator name for the fund. But even because Mike and Ramon joined Acrobator even before its first close. If you look at the underlying strategy of finding opportunities that basically generate disproportionate alpha, we were already shaping this data angle below it. And then if we look at where we are today, the capabilities we have, the focus on personal journeys and the data guided investments, we just felt that we needed an umbrella brand that brings that all together. And I guess Acrobator is narrow and specific for a certain ICP, which is great, right? Because it's a product in the end. But 432 Legacy is the future that we see that brings everything together.
Yeah, and I mean, also, Andreas, it really came like many years. Also, we were just discussing values, where we want to head, and for us, this is really a long-term thing. Where, to Joachim's point, we really want to create and continue with a brand that is very dear to us, and that stands for our values, and that we're motivated to build for the next 20 plus years, right? As it's very long cycles and commitment. So, and also very briefly on the brand name. So the 432 stands for like hertz. It's the most natural frequency. They say like musicians often tune their instruments to that frequency, and it's symbolic for harmony, like being in resonance. That's why we chose the number. And legacy is around the conversations we want to have, both with founders and with LPs, investors. So talking to them around like, what's their past, where they come from, and getting to know them in this process, and also why they're building what they're building, what's the legacy they want to build. And especially talking to family offices and LPs, let's see, like where the new generation is taking over. It's such a beautiful conversation to have, so this is really kind of at the value part that we want to represent.
Am I right in saying that I can say that this does not mean that there won't be an Acrobator 2, meaning a fund focused on the arbitrage opportunity of the...
That was a double negative.
I make my questions difficult, Joachim.
No, does it mean there won't be an Acrobator 2? No, on the contrary, I think.
Yeah. No, so 100%. I mean, there will be Acrobator 2, and I mean, the arbitrage strategy works, right? It works. We do have a great network there. We're going to continue to double down on it. The focus also on enabling tech and what we've been doing, and looking more into the shovels, and instead of like investing in the gold seekers, has really worked for us. So we're going to continue to double down on this. We're going to continue to leverage our network. It's only that we gradually transition more to this outbound-driven strategy that we described earlier.
And then it's all about arbitrage. What's arbitrage? Is making sure that you don't overpay when you get in, and capitalize on the exit momentum. And with Quantics, we can just do this at a different scale.
So we're looking at the end of the year. Tell me, what excites you the most about going into 2025?
Yeah, for me, it's really like Mike said, it's the conversations we can have. Like right now, we're having a conversation with potential LP who wants to transform, the movie industry, but it also ties into gaming. And it's not just about, I want to be invested in some kind of little tech niche within, but what does it take to build a portfolio of companies that can make use of what's happening now in the world of film and gaming, and to build a new category leader there. So that goes across different types of market segments, from service providers to technologies to marketing to anything. And to have a conversation where we can actually say like, yes, we can help you scope this. Maybe we need to build a team around it, maybe not, but it's a very different thing. And then imagine once we've scoped it and we see the potential, we can do it, and we've identified the size of the money that we basically need to make it work. Every conversation we'll have with a founder has a clear intent, and it's connected directly to the interests of the investor. And that is very difficult to get otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, look, I also really excited about the type of conversations we're going to have. I mean, we're also now just starting the next year fundraising, so it's going to be more of these conversations we're going to have with LPs. that I'm very much looking forward to. Also empowering these conversations with the system and Quantics, not only for the sourcing, but also for the conversations we're going to have with LPs. And then, like, personally, I'm really, really excited, as you know, about the personal development part of it, and that's just a deep passion about that topic alone. I could talk for hours, and I'm really excited that we're going to bring this work to all our founders. I'm excited that we're going to bring this work to the broader ecosystem as well, Andreas, as we're doing this together with you guys and Fred, and have just more people being exposed to it.
Yes, we will earn the right to the name of the VC asset class, meaning that we are the hippies of the private equity industry.
Love it. Love it.
Incredible, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thanks, Andreas.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.